you. Thanks a lot for the kind introduction and for having me here today. Hello, everybody, and hejsan to Sweden. You know, I used to live there for more than 6 years, so I really still miss it. In the next 20 minutes, I'd like to share with you the measures taken by my team from Castles and Gardens Baden-Württemberg in order to support our big old trees in our gardens and to prepare our gardens for the future. There's not much time, and I'm already very excited for your feedback. So without further ado, let's get started. First, I'd like to give you a very short introduction. Then we'll go into detail and look at nurseries, at tree physiology, at ways of watering trees, and at site conditions and soil melioration methods. Then I will speak about vegetation underground and about soil compaction. I will tell you about research cooperations we have and conclude with a little outlook in the end. So where are we? Baden-Württemberg, that's one of 16 German states, and it's situated in the very southwest of the country. The organization I work for is part of the state's government. There are more than 50 historic gardens owned by the state in Baden-Württemberg, that's true. But my organization is responsible for the maintenance of 8 of them. So with a total amount of approximately 10,000 trees we take care of. The problem why we're all here today, this rapid climate change and its consequences for our trees, has already been addressed and described by all the speakers this morning, and it was so brilliant, so I won't repeat anything now. But while these effects also affect trees in forests and trees in cities and trees along roads and trees in modern parks and gardens, we always have to bear in mind that we work with monuments. So our task is therefore to preserve the original substance as long as possible and to preserve certain pictures and designs and ideas how the garden was meant to look like. My team consists at this time of landscape architects. We have a garden historian, an art historian, a forest scientist, an arborist, and of course we have gardeners, though not enough, and actually not in every garden that we take care of. This information may suffice to give you a rough impression. So, before I go into detail now, I want you to understand one thing. Most of the measures that we try and do, we have only just started in the last 2 years. Therefore, we do not have any proper results yet, let alone results in terms of statistically significant data. It's trees we are dealing with, so to collect data, we need much more time. And in most cases, we work on individuals. For example, we have one tree or a few trees per garden that get special treatment in order to help them cope with climate change. But of course, each of them is one individual case. There is no sample with a certain number of trees. There's no zero variant to compare it with. In most cases, it's just one individual tree with unique problems and treatment. So for this reason, that's really important for me to tell you. So far, I cannot answer questions like, does something work? Or how big is the effect? I can only share our thoughts and ideas and our observations and of course our hopes. But now, point 1, nurseries. This is very crucial. It is a very traditional thing and in itself part of the immaterial values of a monument. The knowledge how to propagate and to reproduce existing plants and how to test and introduce new plants into the garden. When those big cultural transfers took place hundreds of years ago and expeditions were sent to America and Asia and to Africa to collect plants and seeds and bring them to Europe, these new and exotic tree species were tested in nurseries on site or very close to the parks and gardens. For all these reasons, in former times, all of the bigger palace gardens had a nursery. Of course they did. Later on, when less and less gardeners were employed to maintain the gardens, the nurseries were given up. But today we reactivate these nurseries in our gardens. If possible, we use the original location. The picture shows the original water bassin of the historic nursery at Schwetzingen Palace Garden that were excavated when we rebuilt the nursery there. In our nurseries, we rear natural regeneration that we collect in the gardens. Mostly it's beech, oak, and chestnut so far. Our hope is that these individuals are already accustomed to the site conditions. Second, we choose particularly vital trees in our gardens, or we choose trees that are especially valuable for some reason and try to propagate them in nurseries. And third, we test other species. But what is more important, we have heard a lot about it already. We test different provenances of the species we have in our gardens. Provenances that come from areas which are very dry and hot and are therefore more accustomed to drought and heat than others. So far, we have oaks and beeches from different origins within Germany, but also beeches from Catalonia and from Poland. And we got those from contacts we have in these countries. I think this might turn out to be a really good chance to keep those important tree species in our historic gardens. But of course, like in former times, we first have to test if these provenances can cope with other aspects of our climate. For example, we do not have much frost here in the southwest, and they have to cope with this fact as well. We had this question about the effect of changing winters this morning before lunch, when you caught me a little bit by surprise. And we don't give in. That's what I want to tell you about this. We don't give in, not yet at least. As long as we stand a chance, we won't substitute our species for others. They are so important and a part of the history and the picture of our monuments, and we still need them. There are some important possibilities regarding plant physiology that we try to make use of. When we collect chestnut seedlings or other tree seedlings, but mostly chestnuts so far, in order to rear them, we plant them in these clay tubes. We want to stimulate them to grow taproots, quite long roots, that later on grow deep into the soil where there's a better chance to find water in summer. We do this in the nurseries or directly on site. And we focus on treating every newly planted tree with special care, at least for the first few years, because that turns out to be crucial for its future. Therefore, careful and correct pruning, for example, right from the start, is important to help them build their crowns. It's gardener skills that are needed here, and just like it always was today and in former times. So we provide our gardeners with special training for it. Watering big old trees often is not so easy. We thought a lot about that. How do you get considerable amounts of water to its roots? Only last year, we discovered an interesting idea, the so-called tree fuel station. Our elms had a must year in 2022, and because they produced so many seeds, their vitality seemed to suffer. And then summer came with heat and drought, and we were really afraid to lose the last two big elms that we have in Borsal Palace Garden, probably the only remains of a historic alley of elms. So we installed two 1,000-liter tanks, you can see them on the right side of the picture, and valves and perforated hose pipes under the elm's crown. And we covered the whole area with cloth and let huge amounts of water slowly dribble into the ground all summer long. The elm's looking fine. Of course, this is not a solution for each and every tree in a garden monument, I know, but in emergencies, it's quite a good and easy way to do. We try to optimize the locations of our old trees in order to increase their vitality and thus enable them to cope with stressful times of drought. Measures and means depend on the site conditions. We always start with a soil survey to analyze the physical, chemical, and also biological characteristics of the location. If the soil is compacted, injections with air pressure can be the way. Otherwise, we carefully drill holes in the soil around the tree. Depending on the results of the soil survey and the requirements of the tree species concerned, those holes or injections are then filled with different soil melioration substances. This can be humus, compost, biochar loaded with nutrients, compost tea with lots of bacteria, mycorrhiza, and others. And because there was a question in the morning, if I remember right, in the question and answer section, you should always load biochar with nutrients. For example, put it in a compost heap for a few months. That's what we do. Or buy products that are already loaded, but not use pure biochar. Something rather simple, which can always help trees located on lawns, is to stop cutting the grass and to let it grow high. We had this before, I think. Thus, the soil doesn't dry out as fast as before. Instead, the moisture is kept in the soil. And also, high grass is not so popular to walk through. and therefore helps to prevent soil compaction. And in landscape gardens, meadows and lawns and freely growing grass often meet the original historic picture much better than the accurately cut lawns that we have everywhere today. While we were looking for measures to meliorate and optimize tree locations, we encountered the research project called Sunobomb. It's conducted at HWK Göttingen by Dr. Katharina Weltek's group. I think she will be part of the workshop, if I remember right, in Germany in September. Basically, the idea of this project is to sow a mixture of herbaceous plants with strong and deep growing roots under tree crowns. After a couple of years, these plants are then taken away completely. And when the roots are decomposed, their canals stay in the soil and allow water uptake into the soil and gas exchange. So it's kind of soil loosening in very, very sensitive areas where you couldn't do it otherwise. We tried this sowing with several trees in different gardens, and we're really curious to watch its development. And so far, to my eyes, it looks really great. What we've observed more often than not, many times, is that soil compaction is really a problem that can be the last drop for stressed trees. And here you can see quite a negative example in one of our much used and overused gardens. In consequence, we really fight even within our own organization to keep the areas under crowns free of any strain or burden. And we try to absolutely avoid things like this, parking and even walking of masses of people or dancing when we have an open air festival, whatever, in these sensitive areas. So normally we try to really fence them when we have a festival or a concert or whatever there. And we try to avoid anything that could add to soil compaction under the tree crowns. Just some words about a very interesting research project that we conduct together with the Natural History Museum in Karlsruhe. So far in 3 of our gardens, we are about to assess the biodiversity regarding fungi, both the good ones that live in symbiosis with the trees, so form mycorrhiza with them, and the bad ones that infect and sooner or later can kill the trees. It's my conviction that the interactions with fungi play an enormously important role in a tree's life. So the more we know about it, the better we can, for example, support mycorrhiza partners or try and keep lethal fungi at bay. But something else about mycorrhiza, we already heard about these lists of future trees. But when those trees were tested, to my knowledge, often their capability to form mycorrhiza with our fungi was not taken into consideration. So there are species, as far as I know, on these lists, and they are ranked quite high, that cannot form this kind of symbiosis with our fungi. And planting only these species might lead to a decrease of these fungi. And as these fungi are crucial for other trees, this might cause extra problems for those species. So I'm just mentioning this so you see that there's more to this important aspect that probably should be taken into consideration as well when you choose future trees. A little outlook now at the end of my talk. We are going to continue with everything we've started, and we have to focus on evaluation. We're going to watch and learn. But of course, there already is a new project planned. We want to give it a try and install soil moisture sensors in the ground. The idea here is to collect data about the soil's water content and proximity to trees in order to be able to react immediately and very targeted when this sinks below a level that seems to be critical. Of course, we have to find out which level would be critical, but I'm looking forward to this project. So I think it's always good to react targeted. And we think about how we could collect water in the gardens. It sounds so easy, but it's not. I mean, there's rain and there's also the water that we use for fountains. And we try to find solutions now how to keep this water in the gardens and store it there somewhere so we can use it when we need it for watering and irrigation. It's just a short outlook what we are thinking about at the moment. And then I'm already done. I was faster than I expected, but maybe that's good for the next ones and for the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.